Curious what it's really like to live in Virginia's most overlooked small towns? This report examines 15 of the smallest communities facing some of the state's toughest conditions, including high unemployment and elevated crime rates. It looks past the surface and focuses on the economic and social realities that can exist behind Virginia's scenic mountains and coastline. First is Emporia, a small city of around 5,600 residents that has been experiencing persistent economic and social strain. It frequently appears on lists of Virginia's most crime-affected areas, largely because per capita measurements tend to amplify problems in smaller populations. Even accounting for that factor, the figures remain notably high. In 2024, Emporia recorded 58 violent crimes, producing a violent crime rate of 1,069 per 100,000 residents. Property crime was also elevated, reaching 2,912 per 100,000 people, driven primarily by theft and burglary incidents across the city. The financial indicators point to additional pressure. Median household income stands at $49,375, far below the Virginia state average of $90,900 and sitting at roughly half that level. The poverty rate is 13.5%, and for many households in the city, that figure reflects ongoing financial difficulty rather than short-term or occasional hardship. Next is Jonesville, a town of about 1,300 people that illustrates how economic decline can become deeply concentrated in rural communities. Its key indicators sit well below statewide benchmarks. Median household income is $17,716 per year, which amounts to less than a quarter of the Virginia state average. Poverty is widespread throughout the town. More than 54% of residents live below the poverty line, compared to less than 10% statewide. Employment opportunities exist, but many of the available jobs do not provide wages sufficient to support long-term financial stability for working households. Property values reflect the same broader stagnation. The median home price is $122,500, nearly half the state average. The town is largely white and aging, with a median age of around 46, pointing to a population that is growing older rather than drawing in younger residents or new economic activity. Moving west into Virginia's Appalachian region, St. Paul is a small town in Wise County with just over 1,000 residents. Median household income stands at $29,554, roughly one-third of the state average, placing it among the lower-income communities in the region. Approximately 33% of residents live below the poverty line, twice the statewide rate. Job opportunities are limited. With few major employers and a relatively high unemployment rate, many residents, particularly younger generations, have few clear pathways toward economic advancement. The town's population is over 97% white, with a median age of around 41, reflecting a racially homogeneous and gradually aging community. Not far from St. Paul lies the town of Appalachia, named after the mountain range that has long defined both the landscape and the economic character of this part of Virginia. The town once relied heavily on coal mining and railroad industries, and it continues to deal with the economic consequences of those industries declining over time. With a population of about 1,600, the poverty rate exceeds 32%, placing significant financial pressure on a large share of households. The population is predominantly white, with a median age of around 40. The median home value sits at just $65,500, a figure that reflects weak market demand rather than genuine affordability. Like many communities across the region, Appalachia remains caught between a fading industrial past and limited prospects for economic diversification. Pennington Gap has a population just over 2,000 and has faced considerable economic and institutional challenges in recent years. The Lee County Community Hospital, after closing, reopened in 2021, restoring an important source of local healthcare access. Economic difficulties, however, have continued. The median home value is $86,900, a low figure that reflects limited demand and minimal economic growth rather than housing affordability. Median household income is $22,857, less than a third of the Virginia state average. An estimated 59.5% of residents live below the poverty line, one of the higher rates among the communities examined in this report. Unemployment remains elevated, consistent with the town's shortage of stable, viable employment options. Hopewell is a city of around 23,000 residents located east of Richmond, and despite its historical significance and urban scale, it faces persistent economic and public safety challenges. Median household income is $48,681, well below the Virginia state average. and nearly 24% of families live in poverty. Crime rates add to the city's difficulties. According to the latest FBI data, the violent crime rate sits at approximately 380 per 100,000 residents, and property crime exceeds 2,000 per 100,000. These figures are compounded by limited job prospects and moderate to high unemployment across the city. Hopewell is frequently identified as one of Virginia's more troubled small cities, given its combination of economic hardship, elevated poverty, and persistent crime rates that have proven difficult to reverse over time. Independence is a small town in Grayson County in Western Virginia with a population of just 1,144 people. Economic data places it well below statewide benchmarks. Median household income is approximately $36,250, roughly 40% of the state median, and about 17.6% of residents live below the poverty line. Crime rates are moderate relative to the town's size. In 2024, the property crime rate was recorded at approximately 2,886 per 100,000 residents. One of the more telling indicators of Independence's longer-term trajectory is its median age, which sits at around 58 years old, considerably higher than the state average. That figure points to a sustained pattern of younger residents leaving the town in search of employment and opportunity elsewhere, leaving behind an older population with fewer resources to drive economic recovery or attract new investment. Petersburg is a historic city located just south of Richmond with a population of approximately 33,300 residents. According to the latest FBI data, the total crime rate stands at around 3,932 per 100,000 people, roughly 86% higher than the national average. Violent crime alone exceeds 1,043 per 100,000, meaning residents face a substantially greater likelihood of becoming victims of crime than in most other parts of Virginia. Median household income is $50,700, well below the state average, and approximately 21% of the population lives below the poverty line. Petersburg's persistently high crime rate remains its most pressing challenge. Decades of concentrated poverty, a shortage of stable employment, and weak social infrastructure have continued to slow the city's economic recovery and limited the ability of many residents to improve their circumstances over time. Moving into Western Virginia, Saltville is a small town of roughly 1,773 residents set against a backdrop of mountain terrain. Despite its surroundings, the town faces considerable economic pressure. Median household income stands at approximately $46,098, nearly half of the Virginia state median, and around 23.6% of residents live below the poverty line. The median age of about 47.1 years is relatively high, reflecting a pattern in which longtime residents remain while younger people leave in search of better employment prospects elsewhere. The median property value is approximately $92,000, a figure that points to weak market demand rather than strong investment activity in the area. Saltville also carries a notable historical identity. The town was once the site of significant salt works that functioned as a vital industrial hub during the 19th century, and that legacy continues to define much of its local character today, even as the economic conditions that supported that era have long since passed. Craigsville is a small community in Augusta County with a population of around 915 residents. The town is approximately 97% white, with a median age of 36.8, making it a relatively young community by regional standards. Despite that, local economic opportunity remains limited. The economic data reflects significant strain. Median household income is approximately $40,080, well below the state average, and 31.4% of residents live in poverty. Many workers are employed in low-wage service sectors or commute to nearby cities for work, as local job options remain scarce. The median home price is around $143,800, a figure that makes housing relatively accessible but also reflects weak demand and limited investment activity in the area rather than a healthy local market. Franklin is a small independent city in southern Virginia with a population of around 8,300 people. On standard economic measures, it sits closer to the middle range than many communities in this report. Median household income is approximately $65,125, and about 16.7% of residents live below the poverty line, representing a measurable but not extreme level of economic hardship within the city. The more prominent concern in Franklin is its crime rate. According to the latest available data, the city records roughly 3,000 total crimes per 100,000 residents, approximately 42% higher than the national average. Violent crime stands at around 460 per 100,000, and property crime at approximately 2,539 per 100,000. Those figures place the statistical risk of becoming a crime victim in Franklin notably higher than in many comparable Virginia cities, even if the overall population scale remains moderate. Franklin has a racially diverse population, with residents identifying primarily as Black or African American at 52% and white at 38%. Exmore is a small community on Virginia's eastern shore with a population of around 1,400 residents. Unlike many of the predominantly white communities examined earlier in this report, nearly half of Exmore's residents identify as Black or African American. Median household income is approximately $34,773, less than half of the Virginia state median, and roughly 25% of residents live below the poverty line. Educational attainment falls below the state average as well, with only about 15.7% of residents holding a bachelor's degree or higher. That gap limits access to higher-paying employment for a significant portion of the population. The median home value is approximately $162,200, which is relatively accessible in absolute terms. But as with many communities in this report, that affordability reflects softer market demand rather than strong investment interest or meaningful economic growth. Martinsville is a small city of about 13,500 residents in southern Virginia that built much of its economic identity around the textile and furniture industries. The decline of those industries over recent decades has had lasting consequences for the local economy. Approximately 21.8% of residents currently live below the poverty line, well above the state average, and per capita income stands at roughly $28,800, reflecting the financial pressure that many households continue to face. Industry remains part of the local economy, but many of the available positions offer lower wages, and employment opportunities are not as varied or abundant as those found in larger metropolitan areas. A number of residents commute outside the city for stable work as a result. Martinsville does rank among the more affordable places to live in Virginia, with low median home values and a reported increase in affordable housing development in recent years, providing some degree of stability for residents navigating the city's ongoing economic transition. Galax is a small city of about 6,700 residents, widely recognized for the Galax Fiddlers Convention, of a traditional American music festival held annually since 1935. That cultural identity, however, exists alongside persistent economic strain. Median household income is approximately $41,438 per year, nearly half of the Virginia state median, and roughly 23.4% of residents live below the poverty line, more than double the statewide rate. Per capita income stands at about $31,429, reflecting limited access to higher-paying employment and an economic structure that is less diversified compared to other parts of the state. The median home value is approximately $126,800, a figure that appears modest from a cost of living standpoint, but more accurately reflects weak market demand than sustained economic growth or investment activity in the area. Norfolk is a coastal city with a population of roughly 23,000 residents, presenting a different profile from the smaller towns examined throughout this report. Median household income is approximately $62,382. The city's most significant challenge is its crime rate, which sits well above the national average for both violent and property crime. Recent analyses indicate that the likelihood of becoming a victim of property crime in Norfolk is approximately 1 in 25. Norfolk offers a lower cost of living relative to many major cities in the United States, but elevated crime rates and income inequality continue to place it among the more challenging urban environments in Virginia. The city is home to one of the largest naval installations in the country, and military activity plays a substantial role in shaping the local economy. That concentration, however, also creates a degree of dependence on a single sector, which has slowed broader civilian economic diversification over time.